One man followed almost every money rule his grandfather taught him. He never carried debt. He never owned a credit card. He stayed with the same employer for 40 years. He kept his savings out of the stock market because, as his grandfather liked to say, that's where people lose everything. By retirement, he was struggling to cover basic expenses. Another man spent most of his adult life doing things that would have horrified that grandfather. He moved back in with his parents after college. He switched jobs, invested in the stock market, he used credit cards carefully and deliberately. By retirement, his home was paid off, his savings were growing, and money was one of the few things keeping him awake at night. Same generation, same economy, similar starting point. Yet one of them spent retirement worrying about bills, while the other spent it worrying about where to travel next. And the gap between them didn't begin with some brilliant investment, a six-figure salary, or a lucky break. The moment that pushed their lives in different directions looked so ordinary that neither man noticed it when it happened. Years later, that ordinary moment would quietly become one of the most expensive decisions either of them ever made. Relax, because by the end of this video, you'll know exactly where their futures separated. And why is that same question waiting for almost every one of us today? Roy S. Gill and Jose K. Howe graduate the same year into the same economy, with job offers already waiting for them. Roy takes a position paying $60,000 a year and feels something close to relief. He grew up hearing that financial success wasn't complicated. Work hard, stay out of debt, save your money, avoid unnecessary risks. The formula had worked for generations of people before him. So when the company offers a 401k, he declines, because the stock market feels too much like a wager for his liking. He opens a passbook savings account instead. Every payday, money goes in. Every month, the balance grows. He will never own a credit card, cash only. Every purchase, every bill, every transaction. Jose takes a different first step though. Instead of getting his own apartment, he moves back into his parents' house. And from the outside, it looks like a step backward. To Jose, it's a calculation. If rent is his biggest expense, removing it gives him a head start that most people his age won't have. He isn't alone. Around 6 out of 10 recent graduates are doing something similar, delaying independence long enough to build financial stability first. Within 2 years, Jose changed jobs. Then he does it again. Each move increases his income by 10 to 20%. The raises arrive faster than they ever could have if he'd stayed in one place. Roy watches coworkers leave from time to time, but he never feels tempted. Loyalty and stability matters to him. The company gave him an opportunity when he needed one, so leaving feels almost like breaking a promise. At 22, neither man thinks he's making a life-defining decision. They're simply doing what makes sense. One is building security through consistency, while other is building flexibility through movement. Years later, those two ideas will collide in ways neither of them can imagine. At 23, Roy walks into a leasing office carrying 4 years of what he considers responsible financial behavior. He has never owned a credit card, never financed a car, never missed a payment, never borrowed money he couldn't repay. For years, he has done exactly what he was taught a financially responsible adult should do. The woman behind the desk reviews his application. She types for a few moments, then pauses. Roy waits. A few seconds pass. She studies the screen again before looking up. "Sir, I'm having a hard time finding enough credit history here." Roy frowns. "What do you mean?" "It means we don't really have a record showing how you've handled borrowed money." The words barely make sense to him. But how can someone be financially responsible and still fail a financial screening? He leaves the office frustrated and more than a little confused. For the first time, he discovers something nobody ever taught him. The system isn't measuring whether you've handled debt wisely. It's measuring whether you've handled debt at all. Years of careful behavior suddenly count for far less than he assumed. Eventually, a friend of his father's helps him find a place. The problem gets solved, though. But the lesson stays with him. He rarely talks about it afterward. Jose is 23 too. He's still sleeping in the same bedroom he grew up in. If you judge his life from the outside, you might assume he's falling behind. Some of his friends already have apartments. Some are posting photos of new furniture and first homes. Jose has none of that. What he does have is something much harder to photograph. His credit score keeps improving. His savings account grows every month. His expenses remain low. The financial foundation he's building is almost invisible to everyone except him. That's the strange thing about financial progress. The most important parts often look unimpressive while they're happening. One man has just encountered a problem he never saw coming. The other is quietly building advantages nobody around him can see. At 23, neither outcome looks particularly important. In hindsight, both of them are. But the problem with small financial advantages is that they rarely stay small. Years pass, then more years, and little by little, the distance between Roy and Jose starts becoming visible. By 35, what began as a paperwork issue has grown into something much larger. Roy is still saving diligently for a home. Every month, money goes into the account. Every year, the balance gets bigger. Yet somehow the finish line keeps moving. The house he wanted 5 years ago costs more now. The down payment he was aiming for has grown. The numbers never seem to stand still long enough for him to catch them. In 1965, a typical worker could save a 20% down payment in less than 5 years. Roy is staring at a timeline that stretches well beyond that. Home prices continue pulling away from what ordinary savers can accumulate, widening the gap by thousands of dollars each year. The harder he pushes, the further the target seems to drift. Jose encounters the same housing market. The difference is timing. Years of building credit, increasing income, and keeping expenses low allow him to enter the market earlier. By his early 30s, he buys. From that moment forward, something important changes. Instead of chasing rising home prices, he begins benefiting from them. The escalator that was moving away from Roy is now carrying Jose upward. Neither man controls the market. One simply reached it first. The same pattern is unfolding at work. Roy stays loyal to the company that hired him straight out of school. Year after year, he earns raises averaging around 2%. The increases feel encouraging when they arrive. A little more money, a little recognition, a sign that his work is valued. But inflation has a way of quietly stealing victories before people notice they're gone. Meanwhile, Jose keeps moving. Each job change brings another jump in pay. 10%, 15%, sometimes 20%. The increased compound on top of one another just as surely as investment returns do. Yet one of the most important things Jose does isn't dramatic at all. Every time he starts a new job, he checks his retirement contributions. And every time, he increases them back to 10%. Many employees allow contributions to reset to lower default rates. Jose refuses. The habit takes only a few minutes each time. Over a career, those few minutes are worth roughly $300,000. No celebration, no headline, no life-changing insight, just a small decision repeated over and over again. By the middle of their careers, the gap between the two men is no longer theoretical. It's showing up in their homes, their paychecks, their retirement accounts, and their future options. From a distance, the story appears simple. Roy trusted the old rules. Jose trusted the newer ones. Jose is winning. Roy is losing. Case closed. At least that's what it looks like, except that's not actually what happened, because the future is hidden from everyone equally. Jose doesn't know whether the market will recover. Roy doesn't know either. Neither do economists. Neither do fund managers. Neither do the experts filling television screens with confident predictions. The uncertainty is the entire point. If everyone knew recovery was coming, staying invested would be easy. The decision only becomes valuable because nobody knows what happens next. Night after night, Jose wrestles with the same question. Sell or stay. Protect what's left. Or trust a process that suddenly feels much harder to trust. 20 years earlier, opening an investment account took only a few minutes. Staying invested now requires something much more difficult. Conviction. Eventually, he makes his choice. He stays. The downturn continues for a while. Then it slows. The recovery begins. Markets stabilize. Growth returns. Compounding resumes its quiet work. Years later, that decision barely occupies a sentence in the story of his life. Yet it becomes one of the most valuable choices he ever makes. because the decision that shapes his retirement wasn't the one he made when he first started investing. It was the one he made when everything around him was telling him to stop. Years later, the results are impossible to ignore. By 65, Roy and Jose are both retired. The race they've been running for more than 4 decades is effectively over. The numbers tell a clear story. Roy retires with a nest egg roughly 41% smaller than Jose's. Jose retires with a paid-off home, a portfolio strengthened by decades of market growth, and hundreds of thousands of additional dollars created by habits so small they barely registered while they were happening. The financial verdict seems obvious. Jose's approach produced more wealth. The spreadsheets agree. The calculators agree. The math leaves very little room for debate. But human lives rarely fit as neatly into a spreadsheet as financial projections do, because while Jose was building assets, Roy was building something else. For decades, Roy remained part of the same community, the same streets, the same routines, the same relationships. He knew the people around him, and they knew him. When family members needed help, he was often the person who showed up. When grandchildren needed support, he found ways to be there. Years later, some of those grandchildren would struggle to remember exactly what kind of car he drove or how much money he had in the bank. They remembered something else instead. They remembered his presence, his reliability, his time. Jose accumulated more financial security. Roy accumulated a different kind of wealth. And that's where stories like this become uncomfortable. Most people want a clean conclusion, a winner, a loser, a correct answer they can immediately apply to their own lives. Copy Roy or copy Jose. Choose one, move on. The problem is that neither option truly exists anymore. Parts of Roy's world have already disappeared. Parts of Jose's world are changing rapidly. The financial environment that rewarded loyalty for one generation shifted beneath the feet of the next. The environment that rewarded aggressive job switching and early asset accumulation is shifting too. The rules never stay still for very long. Every generation inherits a different game, and every generation spends part of its life believing the current rules will last forever. Eventually, they don't. They change. They evolve. Sometimes they disappear completely, which means the real lesson isn't that Roy was right or that Jose was right. It's that success often depends on recognizing when the world around you has changed before everyone else does. Roy answered the question his era presented. Jose answered the question his era presented. And whether we realize it or not, a new version of that question is already sitting in front of us today. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.